Here we go. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is laying out for us the interface of the battle between the godly soul, which wants godly things, and the animating or animal soul, which is basically driven, or not just basically, is essentially driven by self-servingness. Not evil necessarily, simply self-servingness. Its question is this good for me? The godly soul's question is this good? And that's where the conflict is. So when we read about each of them, we might think, okay, let the godly soul do godly things, let the animating human soul do human things, and everybody go about their way. The conflict comes is when boom, they lock heads because they're both trying to occupy the same space. You remember my favorite analogy of chess? Each piece is trying to occupy the same square, and this town ain't big enough for the two of us. So there's going to be a dislodging. Now, in order to help us identify what we're feeling, whether it's coming from the godly soul or it's coming from the animating human soul, the Alter Rebbe has laid out for us some indicators. But like so much of life, it's not a yes/no binary. It's more of a an approximation, an insight, and that is that the animating soul is most comfortable. It's Mishkan, like the Mishkan where God resides. Its most comfortable space is in the heart. Now, again, we're not here to study biology. When we say the heart, we mean in reaction. Just like when somebody sees something and their heart beats, they get excited about it or they get scared about it. That is a reaction. That's how the animating animal soul works. Now, again, it's important to realize that we are not declaring that everything that comes from the heart is automatically self-serving, because there is, of course, godliness in the heart, the love for Hashem, the love for another, and so on. This is simply an indicator that the animal soul is most comfortable in the reactionary heart. Now, the competitor to the heart is the mind. And again, we're not studying biology. The mind is the comfortable place for the godly soul, not because the godly soul likes academics and high IQ, but more for the capacity of the mind to get outside of itself. I like the word imagination, creativity, the ability to think that there's something other than myself. As a rule of thumb, all sin is obsession with the immediate. I'm looking at what's staring me in the face. I committed myself to a budget. Now I see something on Amazon Prime and I get off my plan because it's staring me in the face. And the balancing of the checkbook, which I'm going to do in an hour or in a week, is so far down the road. So this is staring me in the face, but my mind can see beyond just what's there in the immediate moment. Now, both the animal soul and the godly soul utilize and engage with the other field. That is, the animal soul engages with the mind because otherwise you have pretty bland indulgences. It's the mind that is able to come up with something more creative than just indulging in what's immediately in front of me. So the animal soul goes from the heart to the brain, but is very careful to just try and get something from it before it convinces it to do something that it or talks him out of doing something he wants to do. So it's the classic thing, when the kid asks, if you wanted to blow up the garage, what would you use? And immediately it's like, well, why do you? No, don't ask, I don't want to know. I just want to know. Or to use a more contemporary analogy, I just want to know how to fly the plane. I don't want to know how to take off or land. I just want to know how to fly the plane. And instead of somebody looking above what's right in front of them, they say, oh, okay. So that is an example of the animal soul, the heart, trying to engage the mind just to get something from it before it gets talked out of it. On the flip side, and it's parallel but not equal, the godly soul wants to use the heart to become excited, enthusiastic, to feel passion for the service of Hashem or engagement with others. So the mind wants to engage the heart to feel this enthusiasm and passion. Now, again, each one is battling over the same square, and two forces cannot occupy the same space. So here we continue. Achinexi, behold, the pasuk says. Now, this pasuk that we're about to read is the story of our ancestress Rivka. So you remember that Rivka is born to some bad people. Her father is so bad that God kills him because he was going to prevent her from marrying Yitzchak. Her brother Lavan is so bad that he's recorded in the Haggadah as the origin and the model, worse than Paro, because when Yaakov, her son, runs to his uncle thinking he's going to be protected, not only does uncle not protect him, but he manipulates him and he abuses him. So this is some pretty bad company that she is born to. And she is described as the rose amongst the thorns. She's rescued out of that environment, and she's brought back to marry Yitzchak. After 20 years, she's finally pregnant, and she has these two forces within her. And whenever she walks past the godly place, she feels an impulse for that. And whenever she walks past idolatry, she feels an impulse for that. And she comes to Hashem and she says, what is the point of all of this? So we ask the question, there's a curious point. We say, well, what is she walking past idolatry for? So one interpretation is right. She's out there. She's the shlucha. She's out there trying to be makar of all these people. She says, hey, I came from this kind of environment. Get away from it. But what is she asking Hashem? She's saying, look, I come from bad people. I left the bad people, and now I'm with the good people. I'm married to Yitzchak, Abraham, and Sarah. Why is it that I still feel this impulse that when I walk past idolatry, I feel a sense of connection to it? I'm a failure. I thought that when I lived with bad people, okay, so I'm surrounded by bad people. But now that I'm with good people, I should be totally aligned only with the good people. In other words, now that I'm from, why isn't everything or even anything perfect? Why am I still struggling? I thought I was past that. I thought I left all of that. So Hashem says to her, Lu'um ulum ya'ametz. That's what it says here in this pasuk. There are two forces within you. Now, in her case, it's more of an organisms. There's Yaakov and Esav. But the metaphor is for each of us. We all have two forces within us. We have our impulse for godliness, which when it sees godliness, it gets excited. And we have our impulse, Esav, for selfishness, that when it sees, again, idolatry, meaning anything that appeals to affirming my animalism, it gets excited. And that's the way it is. So it's not that she's failed. Meaning, if I was good, I wouldn't even notice the idolatry. The fact that I notice appears to suggest that I have failed. Because if I was good, I wouldn't notice these things. The fact that I notice these things, she's interpreting as a failure. And one of the core messages of all of Tanya is struggle is not failure. Failure is failure, no excuse, but struggle is not failure. It's not a sin to want to eat the cheeseburger. It's only a sin if I'm willing to consider doing it, and of course, if the person actually does it. So here the Alter Rebbe lays out that except for the tzaddik, which frankly this is the book of the Beinoni, it's not the book of the tzaddik. Everybody is going to have these two forces within them, and they're going to struggle. Now, again, the common perception is that those people, they never struggle. They daven and they are completely laser focused on every word, and it's this incredibly spiritual moment. So when I sit down to daven and I start letting my mind starts wandering about all the other things, that we start to tell ourselves that means I am a failure. Obviously, I'm not a good davener, because if I was a good davener, I wouldn't be thinking about nonsense when I'm davening. But the response is, well, that's true of your godly soul, but your animal soul is not taking the day off, and he's not going to sit and be quiet just because you want to daven. On the contrary, the more you daven, the more the animal soul gets scared and starts to say, no, 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 don't go there. Don't go to the gym. You know, there's germs there. Nobody ever got hurt sitting on the couch eating potato chips. So the animal soul starts to try and claw back. Ki aguf nikri ir katana. Because the body, our humanity, is called a small city. And here he plays out the analogy, and we'll see the origin. just like you have two kings battling for control over one city. And here's the key point. Each one of these kings wants absolute and total, complete, exclusive dominance. How many Averas is the godly soul willing to concede? Zero. How many mitzvahs is the animal soul willing to concede? Many. Aha, tricked you there. Because the animal soul is not against mitzvahs. It's only against selflessness. So if you can convince the animal soul that mitzvahs will get me into heaven, or mitzvahs will be fun, or mitzvahs will make me happy, the animal soul is all about it. What the animal soul is not at all about and fights desperately against is to be completely selfless and surrendered in the service of something greater than myself. That's the thing that scares the animal soul. The animal soul is not opposed to mitzvahs per se. He's opposed to selflessness. Now, we're not going to get into it here, but just to finish this thought, the Yetzer Hara, which is a partner of the animal soul, he is opposed to righteousness. The Yetzer Hara resents anything that is virtuous. That's the Yetzer Hara. But the animal soul is just interested in pleasures. And he's therefore not opposed to mitzvahs as long as they are done because I like it, because it's meaningful, enjoyable for me, without any sense of service of something greater than self. So these two kings want total and complete dominance. What does that mean? To direct the residents of the town, according to his will, and they should be in accordance to their instructions, for all that is decreed upon them. Now, this metaphor comes from Shlomo HaMelech in the book of Koheles, which I'm putting up on the board for you right here. So, if you look here in Pasuk 14, this is chapter 9 of the book called Koheles. Koheles is Ecclesiastes. So, in Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech is sort of writing at the end of his life and somewhat of a reflection about his life. Some of the famous quotes from the book of Koheles are where he says, Hevel, Hevel, it is all naught. He talks about the time to rejoice and the time to be sad. These are some of the famous quotes. But here in chapter 9, he writes here, you see in verses 14 and 15, there was a small city, and that small city is the person, with a few people in it, and that is all of our characteristics, everything about us, from our intellect to our mobility, to our creativity, to all of the entry points, our eyes and ears, to our behaviors, and so on. And a great king. Now, the great king is a reference to the Yetzer Hara, the animal soul, because the animal soul has a 13-year head start on the godly soul. Or every morning when I wake up, the first thing I realize is I'm here. And then I have to consciously declare that I am in acknowledgement of Hashem, Moda'ani. A child is born and they realize one thing, I exist. And it takes training until, and that's really what it means to be bar mitzvah, that you realize that you're not the center of life, that other people exist. But we don't expect an infant to have that kind of awareness. So the animal soul is considered the gadol, the great or senior king. He's got the head start. And you think about society is out there rooting and promoting the self-serving animal soul. It ain't out there rooting and promoting the godly soul. And he came upon it and surrounded it. So that is, the animal soul consumes us and built great bulwarks. Now, I don't know exactly what bulwarks are, but traps. And what are those traps? Those are the traps of the Averas. That's what they are. Those the Averas are the traps all around us. But what's the rescue? And there was found therein a poor wise man. Now, wise, wisdom, chachma, what is our way out of, again, whatever's staring me in the face, is to be open to something greater than the moment. One of the classic illustrations of this is the story of Yosef, that when he was sold out into Egypt and he was faced with the great temptation of the wife of his master, He envisioned his father. That is, he saw that there was something more than what's staring him in the face at this exact moment. And that's what gave him the power to overcome that impulse. And that's what we mean by wise. Again, wise doesn't mean how many pages of the Talmud he knows. It means my ability to go beyond myself. In Hebrew, chacham, the ability to get beyond myself. And he extricated the city through his wisdom. Again, and what was that? What was that? Was he did tshuva and good deeds. That's the lesson. But no man remembered that poor man, because 5 minutes later, the next thing comes down in front of my face. And that's the way it's going to go. So whereas Rivki Menu was saying to Hashem, I must have failed because I still get attracted to the Avodah Zarah. I thought I was done with all of that. I thought I was away from all of that. And now it's stirring up again. I walk past whatever it is, and I get that stimulus all over again. And that's the point. Every moment there's going to be the chachma, my capacity to get beyond it, and my capacity to get beyond it is not going to save me the next time. And that's not because I failed, and it's not because I'm bad, but because this is what Hashem says to Rivka. There are two forces within you, and they are forever at loggerheads. Yaakov and Esav, like we learn later on. It's a rule that Yaakov and Esav do not get along. Now, when Mashiach comes, we are told that Yaakov and Esav will get along. Why? Because everyone's going to become nice? Because it's the voice of Jacob in the hands of Esau. Our ultimate goal is to harness, not to destroy, to harness the power of Esav, to be directed under the authority and dominion of the voice of Jacob. That's the highest level. So when Yaakov disguises himself as Esav, and his father Yitzchak declares it's the voice of Jacob in the hands of Esau, and again, his father is blind. He doesn't see what's staring him in the face. Instead, he recognizes this level, voice of Jacob, hands of Esau. That's what we're looking for. Voice of Jacob, hands of Esau. Voice of Jacob, hands of Esau. But that's ultimately an aspiration. Most of the time, boom, they're in conflict with one another. So back into the text. Kach, in the same way, shtei hanefashos. These two, and again, we use the word souls. Now, this is another one of those times where it's a little misleading, because commonly when we say the word soul, S-O-U-L, when we say the word soul, there's a tendency to associate that with the good guy. The soul is godly. But what we might translate it here as the animating force. The animating force is animated by godliness or animated by self-servingness. Remember, at this point, animal soul is not necessarily bad, evil. It's simply driven by some form of what's in it for me. Where, again, the animal soul says, is this good for me? And the godly soul says, is this good? Okay, so these two souls, Helikis, the godly soul, V'achienis habahamis. And here the Alter Rebbe adds another adjective to underscore this point. The one that gives life, that is of the animal. Now, again, we hear animal, it sounds so insulting and so on. But what we mean by that is it simply acts out of impulse, has no awareness of anything other than itself. The animal doesn't do bad things. It doesn't do evil things. It simply acts without awareness of anything other than itself. And when we talk about, certain cultures, they worship animals, it doesn't mean that they think that this particular animal is somehow the creator or somehow the dominant force. They aspire to that animalistic character. And that's what it is. It's aspirational to that level. Okay. Shimon HaKlipa. And again, it comes from Klipa. And remember that within the Jew, the animal soul is Klipas Noiga. That means even though it's not immediately identifiable as godliness, when I see it, I immediately identify it by its Klipa, its form. Remember the word Klipa meaning shell. Concurrently, it's trending towards discovering its godliness. So a very simple example. A desk is Klipas Noiga. When I look at it, I say, what is this? It's a desk. Isn't it godliness? Oh, yeah. because we can use it to study Torah, we can use it to whatever, do godly things. But my immediate interface with it, my immediate identification of it is it's a desk, it's physical klipa. And I, with a little imagination, a little scratching away at the surface, I discover the godliness. So too, within the Jew, his natural inclination is klipa, but it's a klipa that's eminently discoverable as godliness. So when someone says, I'm a nice guy or I value kindness and so on, we say, okay, but what did you do? You haven't added value. You haven't discovered the godliness. When I say kindness is good because it's good to be good to the good and it's kind to be kind and it benefits you and so on, I have to discover the godliness in it, not just the pleasantness in it, the godliness in it. Otherwise, it's just a mercantile exchange of goods and services. I have to discover the godliness that's in it. Nechama zayim zu. They are absolutely engaged in battle. And this is really one of the core points. Because again, the animal soul is not opposed to doing good things. It's just driven by a form of what's in it for me. And that's, again, not necessarily bad, but it's not godly. And if it's not godly, then it's ultimately not fulfilling its purpose for which it was created. As such, it's always going to be in battle with the godly soul, which is eternally committed to finding the godliness within it. Al Haguf, and the battleground, the prize, is our humanity. B'chol eivarav, in all of its parts. Shalakis chafetz v'retzaina, because the godly soul's passion and desire, shetehei hi levad ha'mashelas olav ha'manigasai, is to be moisheles. Now, the word moishel comes from the word dominant, like a mushel. You've heard the term, say somebody uses a mushel, which we translate in English as an analogy. It's designed to get your arms around a concept that's otherwise abstract. In fact, somebody suggested that even the English word marshal is a derivative of this word moshel. That is, I'm in charge. So the first stage is do what I said because I'm the overwhelming force. So I'm the overwhelming force. It's not a bad thing necessarily. So, for example, when a person says, well, you got to go to shul in Yom Kippur because you just got to, even if I'm a little bit dragging myself there because I don't have exclusive passion for it, but I know that that's what I got to do. And therefore, I do what I know I got to do. And I get myself there. So it's a little bit of quote unquote against my will, but it's not fully and totally against my will. So that's moshel. The next level is uman higosoi. Now, it's like the word minhag, which means custom. I get accustomed to it. And this level is a cooperational force or factor, not like the Moshe that we were talking about. This is more cooperative. I agree to do it. I'm willing to do it. So the first level is, okay, I got to do it. Guilt or duty or something like that. The next level is, I'm willing to do it. I agree, but there's still a little bit there that I'm only doing it because I've been convinced that it's a good thing to do. There's still a little bit of a factor there that I get to do it because I want to do it. There's still a bit of an I there. V'chol hevarim, and all of my being, yisar l'mashmasai, should be obedient to its instructions. Now, this level is where we're getting to, like the level of the Beinoni. That is, I am aligned with it because it is Hashem's instruction. That old phrase we call Kabbalah soul. I do it because the yoke has been placed upon me, not because you've convinced me that it's a good idea, not because I feel guilty, not even that the sense that I feel it's a duty, but I am subservient to the infinity of Hashem. God says, do it, I'm doing it. So I am in alignment with it. This is already the level of the avoida. And again, remember the word avoida means that I transform something Not just that I'm willing to do it and I go along it sort of half-heartedly or begrudgingly, but I do it because it is the will of Hashem. So this level is an askafia, a resistance, a restraint of impulse level. And here I am moving along. Ubetelem etzel lagamri. And now I become totally batal, that God's will simply becomes my will. You may recognize a similar quote from Pirkei Avos. Betel ritzoncha mipnei ritzonai. Put aside your will for his will. There's a statement in the Talmud that says, Ezehu isha kshera, ha'oisa ritzon baila. Now, the common interpretation of that is, who is the good wife? She who does the will of her husband. But the Rebbe explains it with a little bit of a different spin. Who is the good wife? The one who makes the will of her husband. That is, in this context, we become aligned with Hashem's will. So there is the sense that, okay, I got to go because it's Yom Kippur and I'll feel guilty if I don't go. Then it's, okay, yeah, I understand it's a good thing to go. Then it's, I do whatever Hashem wants. Hashem wants me to go, I go. And then there's this next level. Hashem wants it, therefore I want it. Not only am I willing to comply, I become passionate and enthusiastic about it. It becomes my ratzon. Umerkava aleha. And I become a completely aligned characteristic. Now, this analogy is one we're going to be revisiting a few times, so it's important that we get this phrase straight. The word Merkava translates as a chariot. It's also a modern name for a type of tank in Israel. The analogy of a Merkava is that it is a tool in the hands of its driver. The chariot has no will of its own. Now, we've probably all felt the frustration of thinking that our computer hates us, or my phone, has got it out for me, and that my appliances conspire when I'm sleeping to frustrate my life. That's true. But before that, when we had chariots, they didn't talk as much, and they were total tools in the hands of the operator. And therefore, you couldn't say that the chariot raced out of the track. It's the driver. Now, the level of being a chariot is a laudatory description of our ancestors, of our avos, that they are described as having been a merkava, a total tool in the hands of Hashem. They had no will of their own. Just like the car doesn't decide to go to one location versus another, it simply goes where the driver takes it. So too, the avos, our patriarchs and matriarchs, were completely surrendered to the will of Hashem. They went only where Hashem directed them to go, without any will of its own. Now, in some circumstances, just because it's a good term, it's a good vocabulary word to lock away, there are times, not here, but there are times when that's used as somewhat of a pejorative. Like a person is not passionate about something. He's just the tool. I'm just a hammer and use me to knock in nails where you wish, but I'm not involved. And it describes a dispassionate character trait, which can be a negative. But in this context, we mean that just like a chariot and it's totally surrendered, this is a level that's really reserved for the tzaddik. It's a level, to use the more term of art, is hapcha, transformed. So I'm not putting aside my will for God's will. I have no other will but God's will. Now that's the loftiest level of the tzaddik. The tzaddik has no will other than God's. Now hopefully we touch that from time to time. Hopefully there are circumstances where we become so totally aligned with Hashem that we are completely there. There's no resistance, there's no restraint, there's no struggle. We're totally aligned with the infinity of Hashem. That happens sometimes with the chukim, because I have no passion for checking my clothes for shotness. I have no interest in wearing shotness specifically. I have no repulsion for not wearing shotness. So why do I take my clothes to the guy for shotness? Purely for the sake of Hashem. So maybe there's some resistance there because I don't want to do it, or maybe there's some total alignment. Okay, hopefully everyone gets the basic concept. So this is the aspiration of both the animal soul and the godly soul. The animal soul, like an animal, never wants to pass up some indulgence. Even if it says, well, I'm not going to eat this because I want to save room for later, that's not about some sort of virtue. That's about budgeting. I want to budget what it's for. So the animal soul sees every experience as is this fun for me, pleasant for me, good for me, beneficial for me? That's the lens that he sees everything. The godly soul sees everything through the lens. Is this in the service of Hashem? And sometimes they can get along because I can convince the animal soul that it's fun, it's pleasurable. Fun is childish. It's pleasurable to do mitzvahs. Shabbos is so meaningful. Eating matzah aligns me with my history. Coming to shul is a strong discipline. Whatever it is, I can persuade the animal soul that it has pleasure in this behavior. The animal soul can never persuade, it can try to trick the godly soul to be self-serving. Remember last week we spoke about the difference of the relationship with the opposition. Whereas the animal soul just goes to the brain to get some ideas and doesn't want to stay there too long, lest he gets talked out of his indulgence, obsession with the immediate, don't think about it too much. And the godly soul goes to the heart in hopes of embedding itself in the heart so that the heart will become passionate for godliness. So this is the aspiration. So here we continue, we say, in the hopes that it will take control of the 10 levels, that is the 10 spheros, the 3 of the intellect and the 7 of the character. And remember, that's the goal. The 3 of the intellect should shape the 7 of the character. And the 3 modes of expression called the garments, which is what I consciously think about. Again, not just what happens to drop into my head, but what I deliberately, voluntarily choose to think about, what I deliberately, voluntarily choose to say, and what I deliberately, voluntarily choose to do. And the godly soul and the animal soul want absolute, total dominance over every aspect of it. There's no compromise, right? The animal soul never wants to be selfless, and the godly soul never wants to be selfish. Even if you can persuade the animal soul to be selfless, it's only because later I'll be more selfish. I'll get something out of it down the road. That I'll pass up on this so that I can get something better. So that the person and every aspect of the person be absolutely and completely consumed exclusively with their authority, the animal soul or the godly soul, and allow no outsider to ever come through them. Dahainu, that means klas moichin sheberoishim emulim mechabad shebenefesh alikis. Shechachmasai Hashem ubi nasa lisbeinim bigdulasai asher ad ein chekev ein soif. Ulaholim mehen ayidei hadas hayir b'moicha yupachar Hashem b'libay v'avas Hashem ke'esh bayar b'libay kerish b'shel heves. Liach nixvis, I know it's a lot of words here, we'll come back to it. Begam kolsa nafshay b'chashika b'chafitza l'dafka b'ay b'ein soif baruch hu b'chol leiv b'nefesh u'ma'oid. Now, what does this mean in practice? That the godly soul's passion is that all 3 aspects of the intellect, which we're going to walk you through what those are here, words that you'll recognize. Ultimately, again, Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Das. You'll see them here. All 3 aspects of my intellect should be filled exclusively with those 3 matching aspects, the Chabad, again, you recognize these words, of the godly soul. Now he takes you through it, which is Shehi, that is, Chachma say Hashem, the Chachma of Hashem. Now, what does it mean, the Chachma of Hashem? Chachma, in our context here, should not be confused with data or even intellectual capacity. So it's not how many pages of Torah you know. It's not how quickly you can master some new information. Chachma, in our context, means the willingness to go outside of myself. I like the word imagination, creativity, the willingness to be amazed by something else. And that's the hardest part because it's hard to learn something completely and utterly new. And I've used this analogy before. It's like learning a language. Why is it that a child grows up in a home and they speak Hebrew and English and Yiddish and he picks it up smoothly and flawlessly? And an adult who's got a more developed intellect, who's got more life knowledge and so on, finds it so difficult to learn a language as a teenager and as an adult. Why is it so hard? And the answer is nothing to do with IQ. It has to do with bittul, with chachma. When did I learn that the table is a table? I don't know. So if I say to somebody, yeah, but how do you say table in Hebrew? That's not how you learn a language. You learn it by total surrender of self, which is uncomfortable because I don't want to feel dumb. I know what it is. It's a table. Now just tell me what it is in Hebrew. It's very difficult. So a child has no ego. So they learn table, and somehow they know that when they're speaking English, they should call it a table. And when they're speaking Hebrew, they should call it shulchan. How do they know? Not because somebody told them. They picked it up because they have no ego invested in it. So you want to learn a foreign language? Drop someone in a community where they don't speak a word of English, and they'll be forced to. But as long as I can rely on somebody sort of giving me a crutch, I don't have to go beyond myself. It's very uncomfortable. So true learning is uncomfortable. That's what Chachma is. But then if it stays only in Chachma, I never manifest itself. So all these great ideas, and probably everybody has seen, I thought of that. Why? Because to take it from Chachma to Bina, Bina, like the word ben, child, is the offspring. It's also like the word binyan, to build. I have to build on that idea. Now, in Chachma, as we'll learn later on, all ideas are welcome, even some pretty foolish ideas. But you don't know that at that moment. You have to winnow that out in the level of Bina. And that's the next stage, to contemplate on what does the godly soul want you to contemplate? Godliness. And what do you think about? The gedulosai. Now, the word gadol means big, but it's kind of a little bit of a shallow term. It means infinite. To think about the infinity of Hashem, the infinity of Hashem, that He is uninvestigatable. So anything will eventually run out, and this is, one of my favorite expressions. God is not a thing, so no thing can compete with the no thing of Hashem. So that's what being is. They say, oh, but the Mount Everest is gigantic, or this pleasure is so great. But God is not a thing, so there's no competition. And then to go from there, to create, to give birth, and this is going to be another common metaphor, that Chachma and Bina, Chachma, the creative idea, receptive to something completely outside of myself. Bina, the beginning of the analysis and to start to give it nuance and depth and character. These are compared to a father and a mother. And the product, the offspring, the child is Hadas. Now, Das, which again we translated as knowledge, I like the words imagination for Chachma, analysis for Bina, and application for Das. Das means I understand something so well, it changes something about me. There is a story, it's maybe even a true story, of an ethics professor who was arrested for not paying his fare on the train. And they said, but you're an ethics professor. He said, so what? My friend's a math professor. He's not a triangle. I teach ethics. So what? Why would you assume that because I teach ethics that I'm more ethical than anybody else? Well, this is the idea. That when there is Chachma and Bina, when there is imagination and analysis, the outcome, the product, the child is changed character. This is the whole theme of Chabad. Remember, we've talked about that every community is after the same goal. How do we maintain a engagement in our service of Hashem? So one philosophy is Just learn Torah. Enough of this. Crowd out all of that distraction. Put your nose in the book and pound away at the books. And that works to some degree. The other is bombard the emotions, sing and dance and so on. And that works to some degree. And some say we'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But Chabad is the intellect shapes the heart. Even though they're in competition, our goal is not the destruction of the other. Our goal is the harnessing. So the intellect shapes the heart. It's true the heart is at a disadvantage because at the heart level, the animalistic, the self-serving is much more attractive. What does the godly have to combat that? It's got the power of the intellect to fire up the heart. Not because I'm going to get down into the competition. Oh, yeah, you think staying home is fun? Going to shul is more fun. Yaha, nah. You think cheeseburgers are good? I think latkes are good. Yaha, nah. No, it's not about that. It's about taking the selflessness of the godly soul that is most comfortable in the mind and firing the heart up about it. And again, Lubavitch commercial, can't help myself. This was the Rebbe's whole message. People said you can't get American Jewry to get off the couch. All they want to do is indulge themselves. So one strategy is, well, let's tell them that Yiddishkeit is more fun than anything else. And that works to some degree. You can entice people with the joys of Yiddishkeit. But the Rebbe's message is that ultimately we can persuade them to engage their intellect to get beyond their self-servingness. And the Rebbe pointed just an example of the Peace Corps, that here you have a bunch of American, couch potatoes, and they gave up their comforts of home. They gave up their career advancement for 2 years, whatever it was, to go out to some third world country with mosquitoes and it's hot and there's no latte machine. To do what? To be of service to people who are never going to pay them back. They're never going to make them famous. And don't think that people are only driven by the impulse for selfishness. The Rebbe's message to Viktor Frankl, that man's search for meaning, that people are not just driven by the pursuit of the next indulgence. And this is the goal here of the godly soul, to engage the intellect, to fire up the heart, to result in behavior. So, of course, the question is, so why doesn't that work? Because, unfortunately, there's this other guy called the animal soul who's trying to gin up the heart to get to the mind, to come up with ideas from how I can indulge myself that much more. So it sounds like a great idea until I walk out into the marketplace and everybody else is not agreeing with me. So here we go. What does he want? That he should have reverence in his mind, because that's the first step. And again, reverence isn't about fear of punishment, because fear of punishment is not about God. That's about myself. But it's the sense of reverence that there's something greater than myself, and that it should be felt in the heart, and a love of Hashem that should be fired up in the heart. So we're not saying we stop with all that namby-pamby emotion and everything, just nose to the grindstone. No, we're not taking that position. We're saying that we are in pursuit of having a fired up, enthusiastic, passionate relationship with Hashem. That he should be enthusiastic, to be connected with Hashem. And you recognize these three phrases: with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your everything. That's the Shema. That's the Shema. Miyumka deliver from the depths of the heart, from the right side. Until that fired up heart pushes down and overwhelms the left side of the heart. So the classic thing, right? Wake up in the morning, the animal soul says, what's the least amount I got to do and I won't get yelled at? What do I want to do? And the animal soul says, I want to sit on the couch. The godly soul and the intellect says, let's go to shul. And again, it goes through that imagination side and an analysis and passionate till it gets to the heart, till it doesn't transform. Maybe, that's the tzaddik. That's a nice goal, to transform the selfish soul. It doesn't eradicate it, but it can overpower it. How much? Enough to get the job done. That's the starting level. Yes, of course, our aspiration is that we should be completely aligned, but that's more like the tzaddik. But us who are struggling Bainanese, we can use our intellect to fire up the heart enough to overcome the impulse of the left side of the heart and get the job done. And get the job done. That's the kicker. Where is this left side of the heart finding its passion? From Yesod Hamayim Haroim Shvashiyah Taiva Shemeklipas Noiga. From the Yesod, remember we talked about the four basic elements. Again, we're not studying topography here, but the four basic elements of the character, and they are air, which can, in a negative sense, is like airheaded, nonsense. Fire, which in the negative is anger. Afar, dust or dirt, which is like in the negative is laziness. And water, which in the negative is the endless pursuit of indulgences. Now, they're also in the positive. Fire is passion. Earth is like being grounded and not being blown around. Water is thirst for something greater. Air is not to take things so seriously and to be so offended by everything, flexibility, and so on. But here, the animal soul is driven by the watery character, which is the pursuit of pleasures. That's what the animal soul wants. It wants pleasures. And the godly soul wants the service of something greater than pleasure, not because it's a better pleasure, simply because it is the service of something greater. And again, that this is that attitude. Oh, you can't convince people to do anything unless they're going to benefit from it at some tangible level. You're going to go to heaven. And our argument is no, we're not. That's not true. People can be driven to do something virtuous without any self-interest at all. And our goal is to transform that level of pursuit of worldly passions into the love of Hashem. So if we can imagine the greediest, self-serving, indulgent, and we just redirect that towards holiness. Like the old joke of the guy they introduced, and they say, this is a man who made $10 million in one day in real estate. And the guy gets up and he says, it's not 10 million, it's 20 million. It wasn't one day, it was an hour. It wasn't in real estate, it was in stocks, and I didn't make it, I lost it. So imagine if you could completely transform the passions of self-servingness into the service of Hashem. So rather than the person boasting about his Rolls Royce, he's totally aligned with the mission and the service of Hashem. It's a hard level because the world is not rooting for that. And that's what it means, with all your hearts. This is a play on the word. You recognize this phrase. It comes from the Shema, or it's in the Shema. So the word for heart is leiv, your heart, libecha. So it's an odd phrase, livovicha. Hand, yad, your hand, yadcha. So why is it not libecha, b'chol libecha, all your heart, l'chol livovicha? It's an odd phrase. It's not a common transformation of a noun to a possessive noun. Why is that? So we learn b'shnei yitzirecha, with both your forms, yitzers, like yetzer hara, yetzer tov, but the more literal translation is form. So again, one school of thought in the world of Torah is, how do I defeat the yetzer hara? Totally ignore it. Learn Torah, just force yourself, totally ignore it. The other is overwhelm it. Just bombard yourself with celebration and song and music. Overwhelm it. The message of Tanya is transform it. The intellect will transform the heart. Now, again, struggle is not failure. We may forever be in struggle, like Rivka Imenu. I thought I did that, she says. She says to Hashem, I left the bad people, I joined the good people. How come I'm still got to work for a living? Well, that's the way it goes. That's the aspiration. What now that I'm from, why isn't anything perfect? Because Our message is there are two nations within you. When one rises, the other falls, but it only falls. It doesn't necessarily go away. Yes, when Mashiach comes, voice of Jacob, hands of Esav. That's the highest level of tzaddik. But for the rest of us, that's an aspiration. Like I said, it's not an absolute. Hainu, that means sheyaleh v'yavoy, that it will go up. You recognize this phrase. It's like we say in the insert on Rosh Chodesh and on Yontif. Yaleh v'yavoy. The idea is it goes up to the intellect. V'yagil madrega avarabba, and we reach a level called avarabba. Now, later on in Tanya, not so much in this chapter, we're going to nuance out this term that we call love. Now, we know this as well. We use it intuitively. You know, I love my family and I love ice cream. I mean, it's obviously not the same thing. So even within the word love, we're going to really try to put some parameters around it and not just use it as a throwaway line. But ultimately, all love is the desire to be associated therewith. Even in English, we say, I love my country. We don't mean that we love the dirt from the United States more than the dirt from Canada. We mean we want to be associated therewith. We long to be associated therewith. Now, at the highest level, I want to be associated with it more than anything else. But at least it's the level that I want to be associated with it. I don't want to be out of it. I don't want to be left out. I want to be with it. I'm sorry. So this level is called overflowing love. It's overflowing. It's more. It's more than the intuitive sense of the love of myself. Again, every morning I wake up, and the first thing that wakes me up is the awareness of self. My senses become stimulated. Noise, sound, the light goes on, light, touch, smell. I become aware of self. And the most intuitive form of love is love of self. That's why I intuitively protect myself. But then there can be a love of something greater than myself. That's avarabba. It's abundant. It's more than something I can calculate and explain. So I don't love ice cream. I love what ice cream does for me. It's myself, because I'm not willing to surrender something for the sake of ice cream. But when I say I love my children, I mean I'm willing to give up of my own for them. So we're trying to persuade someone to have children. We don't say, well, if you have children, they'll take care of you in your old age. No, they won't. It's not about something that's going to come back to you. It's not because it's a love that is greater than self. That's an avarabba level. That's an even more powerful love. So again, we're not here to knock down the emotional character. We're not here to ignore that. This is called a love of delights. And now again, a love of delights doesn't mean, oh, this is so much fun. It's butterscotch ice cream. It means it's the love that is what drives me. It is my absolute pleasure. I once had somebody do me a favor. He picked me up at the airport. I said, thank you. He said, it's my greatest pleasure. I said, if this is your greatest pleasure, you got to get out more. But this is that idea. The greatest pleasure is to be in alignment with the infinity of Hashem. Lisanig al Hashem ye'olam haba. This is like olam haba. What is olam haba? It's not where you get to do all the stuff you didn't do in this world, and you don't get in trouble for it. But olam haba means I have absolute clarity of Hashem. I absolutely see it. I know it. There's no conflict. There's no anxiety. There's no inner turmoil. Because everything else, I bought the blue one. Maybe I should have gotten the gray one. I went here on vacation. Maybe I should have gone there. I bought this. Maybe I should have bought that. Olam haba is absolute clarity. When you have absolute clarity that you are where you're supposed to be, you're doing what you're supposed to do, no anxiety, that's what it means, olam haba. So occasionally we can touch that. Again, hopefully everybody, you come to shul on Yom Kippur, you're not thinking, maybe I should have stayed home and done laundry. You're supposed to be there. You have absolute clarity of where you are. And otherwise, everything is anxiety. Like I said, I bought the blue one. Maybe I should have gotten the red one. I went here. Maybe I should have gone there. That's what we're talking about. Who b'moya chachma seichla masani baskal Hashem v'yidiyasai k'fi asaga sichle v'chacham masai V'hu b'chinas hamayim v'zera or zarua shebekedushas nefesh alikis hamapechas l'toiv es b'chinas hamayim shebenefesh habahamas. This it begins in the intellect, and again, not because you're a genius and not because you've learned 50 pages of the Talmud. Simply, you have become aligned with the intellect, which knows godliness because it's not distracted by the immediate. Remember, all sin is obsession with the immediate. The intellect is my ability to look above the immediate. And then I have absolute clarity, which spreads throughout my being. I know I'm supposed to be here. I know I'm supposed to do this. So now, this characteristic that is born of the foundational element called water, which produces, again, we use this word loosely, pleasures. So they can be pleasures of the animal soul, which is that which validates me, or they can be pleasures of the godly soul, that which aligns me with the infinity of Hashem, and transforms it and turns it around. So again, imagine the bull is chasing the person. He can run away, he can shoot it dead, or he can hook up his plow and have it plow the field. Imagine if we could capture the intensity of the animal soul and direct that power, beat the swords into plowshares, into the alignment of the oneness with Hashem. Which again originated, and we could all understand that level where we understand the pursuit of pleasures and how much fun it is. Well, imagine if we had that kind of intensity in our service of Hashem. As is written in the Eitz Chaim, that's a book written by the student of the Arizal, Rabbi Zagluria. The student who wrote it was named Reb Chaim Vital. That we completely redirect and transform that Yetzer Hara into a Yetzer Tov. Because deep down, and this is one of the core points that we will explore, the animal soul is really driven by the love of Hashem as well. And our mission is to unmask it and redirect it. And when we are successful in redirecting the animal soul's passions towards godliness, we get down to its core essence, we discover its infinite godliness. By removing these filthy garments, which are the pursuit of worldly pleasures, that he is encased in and trapped in. So to every other character trait. So the fear of lightning becomes the reverence for God. The fear of being left out and not being invited to sit with the cool kids at the lunch table becomes the fear of being separated from the infinity of Hashem. The pursuit of success, to be, lauded by the whole world, becomes the pursuit of the service of Hashem. All of that character trait becomes not about that's a better one, like I said, that latkes taste better than cheeseburgers, but I redirect my passions for self-service into the passions for godly service. Yil Hashem levad, exclusively for Hashem. And every spoken word and every conscious thought is driven and is controlled by the power of speech and the power of thought of the godly soul. To think about Hashem and His teachings. And every spoken word is always something of godliness. I never interrupt for a moment speaking godliness. And every action should be an action of some sort of mitzvah. That's what the godly soul is pursuant of. And it uses the intellect to contemplate that this is the purpose of creation and this is the purpose that of the character, so that the intellect persuades it, shapes it, guides it, matures it, and so on. Which is the third garment of the godly soul, the garment of action. So, hey, sign me up. I'm all about it. Who would be against it? This is fantastic. However, what's the problem? The problem is I got an animal soul. that's totally on board for everything the opposite. He also wants to dominate. My every thought should be, what can I get out of this? My every word should be, how is this going to make my life more pleasurable? My every behavior is this good for me? And he wants absolute control. So again, if we're out there playing in the backyard, I can run around and no one's trying to stop me. Why is it that when I get into the competitive game, the other guy's trying to stop me? Doesn't know I want to go this way. Well, he wants to go that way. And now we got mutual exclusivity. So I'm all fired up. Sign me up. I want every thought to be the thought of godliness. I want every word to be the word of godliness. I want every behavior to be behavior of godliness. I'm all about it. But what happens? The animal soul, he's got the same but opposite agenda. That's the battle. So this is what Hashem tells Rivka. She's saying, I thought, now that I'm observant, now that I'm sitting around with holy people, my husband is Yitzchak, my father-in-law is Abraham and Sarah, that everything is going to be smooth sailing. It's going to be Olam Haba. We'll have absolute clarity. I'll have none of this distraction. How come when I walk past White Castle, I'm going, I notice it. What happened? And Hashem says, because you got two forces within you. And that same passion that is driving your every thought, spoken word, and deed, your every character trait, your every emotion, that which you long to be with and that which you fear to be separated from, is godly. Well, your animal soul, Esav, is fighting you at every point. And there's no cooperation until the day will come that Esav will surrender his hands to the voice of Jacob. That's the goal, not to destroy him, but to align them in service clearly with the dominant force being the godly and the animating being in service thereof. For the good of the person. Again, the animal soul says, what's in it for me? Is this good for me? The godly soul says, what's in it for Hashem? Is this good for Hashem? What's the point? So the question is, why did Hashem do this? This was a bad idea. Why did Hashem create this way? Why didn't Hashem just create us with a godly soul? Everything will be smooth sailing. Well, the analogy is that there's a king, and the king wants to bring out the virtue of his son. So he hires somebody to try and trick the prince, and seduce the prince. And even the one hired to seduce the prince wants the prince to resist the temptation. But what can I do? That's my job. Like a military game where they say, okay, you guys pretend to be the enemy and try to defeat the good guys. The one who's trying to defeat them, he is hopeful that they win, but he's got to try with all of his cunning so that he can train them. So why do we have this animal soul? Only to give us the strength by overcoming it. So next time I feel the distraction of the animal soul, I can call it for what it is. Even you don't want me to do this. You're just doing it to try and bring out my virtue. It's like the teacher is testing the students. Now, sometimes you could have a teacher who wants to show the student, I'm right, you're wrong, and put them in their place. But hopefully the teacher is testing the student to bring out the virtue in the student, to bring out the best. And the students have said always, why do we have to have tests? Why can't we? Well, you're right, except every other system we tried doesn't work. It's the worst system except for every other system. Without the testing of the animal soul, our godly soul will not fully develop its godly strengths. It's only by overcoming the tests of the animal soul.